In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to work with primitives inside of Maya. So for this lesson, we're just going to start with a blank scene. Now, a lot of times in Maya, whenever it comes to actually starting the modeling process or the process of actually building up your own geometry, a lot of times you'll rely on some pre-built objects inside of Maya, and these are called primitives. Now, to create primitives, we can go up to the Create menu. You can see we actually have primitives that are split into a few different categories. We have NURBS primitives, polygon primitives, subdivision, and volume primitives. Now, in one of our later lessons in this course, we'll start to discuss really a little bit more of the differences between some of these different primitive types, but for now, we'll just kind of get a hang of the process of actually building these and dropping these into our scene. So let's start with the polygon primitives. So we'll go up to Create, Polygon Primitives, and then just simply choose a primitive to start with. Let's start with something like a sphere. So we'll go ahead and click on this, and you can see Maya is now asking us to actually draw this sphere and drag it onto the grid. So you can start really anywhere on this grid that you want. Just simply left click and drag. You can see as I click and drag, my sphere is getting larger or smaller. And once I let off my mouse, you can see now this primitive has been created. You can see it turns a little bit lighter shade of green, which means it's out of this creation mode and now is an actual primitive object. If I go ahead and press the 5 key on my keyboard to switch this to a shaded view, we can see just what that looks like. Now, any objects that you have in your scene that you may want to remove, it's really just a simple process of selecting that object and then pressing the Delete key on your keyboard. Now, some of these primitives you'll see are a little bit more complicated in their creation. So let's go to something like polygon primitives, and we can use something like a torus. So let's go ahead and click on the torus. Once again, Maya is going to ask us to drag this object on the grid. Now this time you'll see we'll actually have a few more steps to have to go through. So again, left click and drag. You can see this first stage is actually determining the actual size of the radius of our torus. So the torus is really just another word for a ring. So come in, drag this out, and as soon as I let off my mouse, and now you can see it's going to ask me to click and drag to set the selection radius. So again, left click and drag. And now it's actually setting sort of the size or the thickness of this torus. And when I let off, you can see now this creation process is over because it turns this little bit lighter shade of green. And here's our torus. Now, before you actually create your primitive objects inside of Maya, it's always a good idea to make sure that you do have your construction history turned on, and that's this little icon right up in here. Now, if we have construction history enabled, which we do currently, we should now have the ability to come in and select the torus or any of our primitive objects that we create. And if we take a look over inside this channel box area, we should have the ability to come in and access this actual creation node right here. If we left click on that, now we can come in and start to manually define some of these creation options. If after we create this torus we decide, well, maybe this is a little bit thicker than what we want, well, we can come in and just start to change that option. So we set the radius from, in my case, what looks like a value of 8 down to something like 3. You can see now it's a little bit smaller radius. Likewise, I could dial this up to a higher value and get this ring to be a little bit larger in size. If we want, we could actually use these in a little bit more interactive way. So if I select one of these attributes, just simply left click to highlight it. Now move my cursor out here in this open area, and now middle click and drag from side to side with my mouse. Again, making sure I'm middle clicking and dragging. We can now adjust these much more interactively. So this becomes a really, really nice way of being able to come in and adjust a lot of these different options after the fact. So again, these options are something that you will not find active unless you have this creation history turned on. So again, you may be asking yourself why we actually would want to create some kind of a primitive object. Well, again, by using a primitive object with maybe just a little bit of modification, this usually will provide a really, really good starting point for beginning to create some more complex geometry inside of Maya. And again, we'll look at that process a little bit later in some of these lessons that are going to be upcoming here in just a few minutes. So for now, that's a look at how we can start to come in and begin creating primitive objects inside of Maya.